Hi, this is Jess. Welcome to the Addiction Help No, this is, see, every time. Someday Kyle is going to be like, you nailed it, kid. You got it.
You know what, though? That's fine.
Truly. Last time I did it, I said the wrong podcast. I said the wrong name. Like Mary Kay and I had a good time with that. So trying that again. This is Lights of Recovery. I'm Jess. This is Dylan. I got that right. And I think if I'm counting correctly, This is episode 5. So hello, Dylan.
Okay. Awesome.
You have the very honorable position of being the first guy that I've had on the show, actually.
Wow. Seems like a high order.
I know. And like, no shade to dudes.
No, that's awesome.
I'm like, I want to talk to anybody, but it's just the way it's worked out. So thanks for hanging out and stuff.
Well, that's cool. Absolutely. I'm just glad that you have me on. So
I know it's been like a cursed experience for us both. Because your name is Dylan T. Rosenthal, and that T is really important. If you don't put that in the email, Dylan doesn't get the invite. So I learned that. But anyway, here we are.
And then the second time around, something happened with me, and
it was pirates, wasn't it? You can tell the truth. We know it was pirates.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we can usually blame the pirates of the internet.
Yeah, sick. So, obviously we're here to talk about addiction and recovery. People probably think this is scripted. Well, no, if you listen to this, it's definitely not scripted, but I know nothing, right? We've had like no background other than I know you do running stuff, which I'm stoked to kind of talk about at some point, but I really just want to get an idea of what your story is, from like, what's the bad and then how did things turn good? So wherever you want to start, whatever you're comfortable with sharing, if we need to cut anything, we can cut it. So, yeah.
Well, I like to get down to just like the, I guess the why for getting sober. For me, my life was pretty, I guess, off kilter. Had a lot of issues going on, from being in debt to not showing up for work to, burning every bridge and relationship I could possibly have. I was in a lot of trouble before I got sober. Yikes. So,
how old were you at
sobriety
this point?
for me
like,
was
age
no
range?
other choice. So let's see here. I'm sorry that I have to think that through, but basically 29 was when I first started getting sober. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. So your 20s were like your chaos era.
Yeah, absolutely. 20s, early teens, mid-teens to early teens.
For you, was it any particular substance, like tale as old as time? You were like, I'm a kid, I'm trying to be cool, I'm trying drinking, or like what got you into dabbling?
I would say I grew up with substance use as a kind of a norm. So it started with marijuana use. Drinking was casual, but marijuana use was just as casual, if not more. And
interesting.
That was probably the most dysfunctional thing that kind of led to a lot of problems for me. Just because that's where I really learned a lot of my, I guess, dysfunctional patterns, and where I really started to feel, I guess, a sense of self. When I first started using, it started to help me to discover something about myself that I didn't know before. And it was like, oh, I like myself this way. I can have better conversations. I can make more connections. I can do everything. And that's kind of where it started, I guess, with that and drinking, alcohol. They kind of went hand in hand. But
so that's interesting. We actually talked about that a little bit in the I think, was it maybe the last episode, or was it, I did a little one this past week, kind of talking about how I got into, like, kratom was a big thing for me. And I think for a lot of us, it starts out as this positive thing. We're not going into it like, yeah, I know this is going to mess me up and like, ruin my life, but I don't care.
Right.
We convince ourselves that like, oh, it makes me more sociable, more productive, more calm. I'm, soothing my anxiety. Like, in the episode, I think that's coming out this week, maybe next week, but we'll see. Mary Kay talks about that for herself, where she struggled so much with anxiety. And so in a way, it's like this self-medicating experience. And that's kind of also how we justify it. And when things get completely out of control, when the substance turns on you, whatever it is, whatever that looks like, it's like, man, but I started with good intentions, like, yeah.
Yeah, started with good intentions. I feel like I understand myself more than I did before. There was something wrong with me before, and now there's not. Like, there's kind of like this this imagination that begins. It's like, oh, when I think more clearly, or like I have a better understanding of who I am, and it's just like this deception that I was under, and I think a lot of it had to do with the acceptance from the family standpoint, and then it kind of created this weird gateway. I don't want to say marijuana is a gateway drug, but for me, it was like it opened the world to like a whole new group of friends. New opportunities to connect with people.
It sounds like it was more the experience of like getting high, and then the reasons behind that, and it being sort of, it sounds like socially, culturally acceptable. And so because of that, there wasn't necessarily the same shame or nervousness or things that, other young people might experience, where they're maybe more hesitant to try stuff, or they feel like they're doing something bad. They might, avoid it, right. Where it sounds like for you, it's just like, yeah, go for it. Sick.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there was a thrill out of doing things that I knew I probably wasn't supposed to be doing from like you're talking about, from a societal acceptance.
Sure.
Like there was like acceptance with certain groups of people, but I go into school knowing, like all the things I've been taught about certain things, like dare, resist, resist drugs and violence, that type of campaign, there, I was just really turned off by like, just like the way that they put that out there. It wasn't a very attractive thing. Just saying no was like, I want to do it now. So I don't know. I was more of like defiant, too, and trying to defy kind of like what societal standards were as well. So it's like a combination of two things. I was accepted, but I also wanted to rebel, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because you wanted to pick and choose your layers of acceptance. You wanted to decide where you fit in, and wanted to be the one doing the accepting or rejecting,
Yeah.
What
I want to be the author of the script.
Yeah. What were you like as a student? Were you a nightmare?
I was terrible. I got kicked out of school, elementary school onward, multiple times. I would do things like moon my cross-country coach. I would
just for laughs.
Things that just for laughs. I would do things like, I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this now, but I would play weird pranks. Like I would take a dump in a urinal. Like that's just the weird stuff that I would do.
Okay, listen, we accept a lot of things here on this show, but that is messed up. Like this is a judgment-free zone, but that's really
know.
up there.
That's bad.
You're a
Yeah. Yeah.
monster. You're
That's
a
actually
monster.
probably been the
Like,
first time. I know. I know. Now the cat's out of the bag. So basically, that's probably the first time I've ever confessed that in recovery was probably
I
the first
love
time. So
that
hopefully no one finds out.
title. My interview
Yeah.
with a true criminal. So,
Right. Yeah.
wow.
Pretty
Okay,
gross.
so
But hey,
how did we go
yeah.
from that version of Dylan, the absolute unhinged monster who was doing horrible things in public bathrooms, to
Yeah.
current Dylan, who is like, you know, you're rocking a great beard, you've got a cool workout room. We were talking about Spartan races. For those of you listening, if you don't know what a Spartan race is, a marathon is 26 and a half miles. I know this because I was kind of into running. And I'm not trying to shit on my own self here because listen, like 3 miles every couple of days, that's a decent amount of mileage. But like 26 and a half miles,
Oh
that's
yeah.
crazy. Meanwhile, a Spartan race is
Yeah.
what, like 90?
It could be, so it's going to vary between pretty much like 4 miles and 35, pretty much. So it just depends on what distance. But one
So like
one that I have coming up is like 32 miles is the one that I'm supposed to be doing coming up on March 30th.
easy, no
So
problem.
yeah, no big deal. Yesterday I actually ran
Interesting.
about 20 miles, I think is what it was. But
And
you know,
do you
that
run
type of
outside
stuff
or you
really
treadmill?
motivates me. I usually run outside. I can't run on a treadmill. I feel like a hamster or something. I just can't do it.
But you
You know,
live up
I'm too
north
rebellious for
because
that.
like,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right, nice. Yeah, I live in
Northern
Florida.
Michigan.
It's already 80
Northern
degrees this
lower
week. It's
Michigan.
oh, I envy that. It's
Dang.
right now. It is 5:21 p.m. and it is 78 degrees outside. And I am not happy about it.
I mean, it's kind of nice though. I mean, think about it this way: you don't have to worry about snow randomly coming in. You don't have to
No, I
worry
love
about
snow.
all the random variables.
Next.
You love snow?
I love snow.
Oh,
Yeah, I
well,
do.
come on up.
I know. I'm one of those weird
Could you
kids.
like a
Everyone's like,
swap?
yeah, but you know, it's been like rainy for weeks. I'm like, what? That sounds so great. I want that. Anyway, enough
Yeah,
about
like
me
some
and the
kind of like.
weather. So, getting back to the reason we're actually hanging out, how did you go from Monster Dylan to Spartan Dylan?
So Monster Dylan to Spartan Dylan. So I think Spartan Dylan is still a monster, but I think the part is that it's the energy is pushed into a something that's more healthy, productive, something that motivates me, gives me a sense of achievement, accomplishment, something that taps into more of my potential. Versus before, I feel like I was just kind of like a puppet on a string for the devil to just kind of just use me however he wanted to. And the
Sure.
only reason why I say that is because I didn't have any control, where now I do have some control over my life. I'm not in control of like everything that happens, but I'm in control of how I respond. And this is part of it, is being able to discipline myself and put my energy in the right direction. And you know, racing's part of that. It's not everything, but it's a portion of it. And it keeps me therapeutically on track. It's like one of my greatest therapies is exercise. So I just enjoy routing my energy that way. And if I don't do that, I feel like it's hard to deal with myself, because I deal with anxiety, ADHD, depression, you know, some of the stuff
Same.
that goes
Yep.
hand in hand. So you
Yep.
understand, with co-occurring disorders and stuff. So that would be me. And so I had to find some things that were really, I guess, practical, you know, that I could use, you know,
Right.
and really discipline myself towards. So, but
So,
yeah, I would
how
say
did you
that
get
person I used
specifically
to
into
be.
running? Like, what did that
So
look
I've been
like in the
running for a long
beginning,
time.
first run, or okay?
Well, I've been running since elementary school pretty much. So it's kind of followed me throughout my whole lifetime. But there was a period of time where as a hopeless romantic, I I got in a breakup situation and I just went like overboard. And this was like I was invited to a Spartan race and I was feeling really bad about myself. And so I like went and did one of these events and it was really helpful. It was helpful for me to just focus on a specific event and aim and objective, when I just wanted to be sorrowful and pitying and just sitting in my room drinking, which
Yep.
was something that I did for a long time. So,
Yes,
yeah.
I
Um,
can relate to that. Like I've mentioned, before in other shows and stuff. For 2020, for me, I understand, it was a horrible year for a lot of people. For me,
yeah.
it was the year my grandmother died, and she was my favorite human in the world. And so, like they say, it's a tale as old as time. I just couldn't cope, and I was either drinking or drunk or hungover or some form of it. Like I drank my way through my grief for like a year and a half. So as I can
Mm,
relate to that as far as a coping mechanism of just sitting in your room feeling sorry for yourself and having a drink about it
yeah.
versus other channels and things. It's interesting because I actually also really like running as a positive coping mechanism. So that's very neat.
Therapeutic. For sure. I would say a big part, you were talking about grief, um,
Mm,
big life events or problems that would come up. I had a hard time managing my life when that stuff would come up. And the coping mechanism of using was always going to be available for me. So it was like a nice comfort to rely upon. I'd be in relationships and I wouldn't be super dysfunctional or something, and then all of a sudden I would just completely derail my life because I would just be like, there's something would happen and it would be catastrophic to me. I would catastrophize it myself and make it worse by using, it
yeah.
was almost like a excuse or cop out for me to do that. But it's also like the thorn in one's flesh, I think, too. Like for us, if you deal with addiction, you understand that if it was my choice at the same time, like now it's a choice, but before it wasn't a choice. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but
A bit. I think
before, because I didn't
I'm
have the
lucky in the
tools.
sense of not having the classic addiction struggle, but I have absolutely developed dependence that has trapped me in that cycle of sort of this self-loathing and then waking up hungover and being like, oh
Yeah,
my god, I am so not drinking tonight, and then feeling like 5 o'clock rolls around and I'm out getting beer and thinking to myself, what am I doing? So it's weird because I've experienced that, but now years later I am able to have a beer or half a beer with dinner and then not think about drinking for weeks and weeks. So it's interesting.
yeah, yeah. So for you, it wasn't like that classic addiction where it's like you got to completely abstain for the rest of your life. Like for
Right.
me, I I feel like as soon as I drink or as soon as I use anything, there's a psychotic change. There's a psychotic change. It's a psychic change for me, and what
Sure.
happens is things are reframed in my thought process. So that's where I think the physiological phenomenon takes place for me versus somebody else that deals with addiction or alcoholism, because I
Yes.
know that for me it's something that is reviling. Like my body has a literal change, and I have an intense craving or urge to keep that a part of my life,
I've heard
and
it
to
described
obsess
as like,
over that
honestly,
next
like it
use.
feels like a switch has been flipped and it's like a different, that Jekyll Hyde
Yep,
argument. And it's kind of a cliche, but
yep,
I mean, it's a cliche for a reason. It really feels like this other self, is my understanding.
yep. Yep, it's all or nothing thinking too. So it's like if I allow it in, I'm going to go after it 100%. Like
Well,
there's no,
right.
you know, uh, soft approach to it. It's more like, no, you know what? Everything changes. One turns into 2, 3, 4, and then 8. And next thing you know, I'm in the hospital again, getting pumped with fluids because, my body's shutting down from drinking so much alcohol. And that's what's happened multiple times to me in my past, is stuff like that, I kept trying to manage it though, over and over again,
So what was the thing that like, what was either your epiphany moment, your rock bottom, your final moment where you decided, okay, something needs to change, and where you actually made that first step to change?
So there was a point in time on July 4th of 2015 where I had a very interesting experience. So I got really drunk on a sandbar, Torch Lake Sandbar, actually, up here in Rapid City, Michigan, right? So it was like,
I mean, it's 4th of July.
It's very interesting because
a drinking holiday.
Yeah. And I loved that. It was a greater excuse for me to just get completely just inebriated. But yeah, in this situation, I ended up, this was in kind of like the peak of some emotions and stuff. And what ended up leading, I guess, because of the emotional stuff that I was going through at that time, that was during that breakup stage, with this particular girl I won't mention. But yeah, I just, like, I didn't want to live. I kind of didn't care about my life very much, and nobody really understood that, the severity of my lack of care for myself. So I would go out and I would try to masquerade or like show people a version of myself that said, this is who I am. I'm like the partier person. I'm the one that, is a people pleaser. I'm the person that, gets all the attention, gets all the girls, da 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 da. I had all these ideas, but meanwhile, I hated myself. I didn't care if I lived or not. And I kept running into problems. This time around, I drank too much. I took some drugs I didn't really recognize. I just took like a handful of pills. And I ended up having a out-of-body experience. Like, I died, and I was resuscitated.
Wow.
That particular day, because my body was severely dehydrated from drinking so much, and the drugs, I think, accelerated that process. I was like 10 pounds underweight or something. And, I came to pretty much in the hospital, had no idea how I got there. But yeah, they had said that they had resuscitated me.
Did you ever find out what the substance was in the pills?
No, I'm assuming one of them was ecstasy, though. They were never able to find it in the reports because I don't think they were ever able to actually do a blood draw on me because I was so out of it. I don't know if I was just severely dehydrated where they couldn't even take my blood. But
so you died. You have died and come back.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a scary moment. I have an out-of-body experience that I had, and it was actually like this aura. I could see myself walking on the sandbar at Torch Lake, and I remember this overwhelming sense of peace that said everything was going to be okay. It was just very interesting. I saw myself walking. I was told that somebody put me on a raft and just kind of pushed me to the shore because I was so drunk and I was barely able to just like function. And then somebody found me on the shore.
Did people know you were having a medical emergency at that point, or kind of, and that's how they were able to get you to shore?
Because everybody I was with was drinking themselves, and they were also the type that would get like just completely hammered, didn't know what was going on, didn't really care probably.
Yeah.
I still have friends to this day that don't remember that particular experience either. So yeah, that's where it started. I was not really a believer in any type of higher power or God or God consciousness or anything like that. And I thought it was just a bunch of hoopla. And then I had that experience, and it was so hard to deny the, I guess, the evidence. Because for me, it's like I could tell that story to somebody, and I would be like people would be like, "What?" Like they would be like, "I don't understand what you're saying," because I was so convinced. Like I was just like, I had this crazy experience. Don't you understand?
Right.
For me, it was just the personal application for me to go through that kept pointing me back to this idea that there might be like a higher power that's looking out for me. And
I really like
it was
that.
a really
And
interesting experience.
I think it's, so important to be able to talk about that here on the podcast and just in general, because whatever you want to call it, whether you're a Christian and you believe in God, or you're a Muslim and you believe in Allah, or you're a pagan and you kind of believe in this sort of an energy. I mean, whatever it is, I think it's so important for people to find that thing that gives them this sort of drive and meaning and purpose, and kind of opens you up to the idea of the mystery of the universe. I keep finding ways to like weasel in my favorite podcast, the Haunted Objects podcast. You guys should come on here somehow, because they talk about that, and they talk about these like broad spectrum ideas, and like clearly I'm ADHD like hyper fixating on this right now too, because I keep talking about it. But I just think it's so interesting where people have these very real, very visceral experiences, and sure, you can describe like I died and it looked like this to people, and you can get all levels of empathy, compassion, interest, even people saying like, oh, I had a near-death experience as well, here was mine. But there's nothing like experiencing it for yourself and kind of taking from it what you take from it. And I don't know. I just think that's such a beautiful, incredible human experience. So I always want to make sure that, while I'm very non-religious, whatever, I really want to lean into talking about that stuff, because otherwise, what are we here for, Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's part of the human experience that we have too, is that's part of the way that we find out more about it, is just from our connection with other people and what they, what their convictions are too, For me, it was like, it was one thing. It didn't stop me from drinking though. Like I had that experience and I was just like, okay, well, I'm alive still. And there's that, maybe, something's looking out for me, but I don't care. And so
sure, it planted a seed, but you were still,
Yeah, like I was convinced that there was something more, but I was like, well, I don't care. What's in it for me? Whatever. I just kind of kept going about my charades, the same stuff. And, one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I'm getting sober again. There's a stint of about, I want to say close to 2 years of sobriety. I met somebody that I wanted to marry, right? And then all of a sudden that became my higher power. And so, all these weird experiences that I had up until a certain point when I actually started to get sober, in my mind, in my body, having the two match up, actually utilizing the tools that were given to me, that kind of thing. That came after tragedy. So there's more tragedy, like,
oh no.
And it wasn't me, because I didn't care enough about me at a certain point in time. But I found out that one of my really good friends committed suicide. And it really hit close to home, because this was somebody that I used with the day before that 4th of July on 2015, on July 3rd. Same guy that I used with, same guy that I used to party with, somebody that was a really close friend of mine. Just started to really go downhill, and he was using some really hard drugs.
So it was maybe somewhat relatable too. It was like this sense of passive suicide, where you're not trying like openly to commit the act necessarily, but like if I'm not wearing my seatbelt, or I'm going to take a handful of drugs, like whatever. And it sounds like maybe,
Yeah.
you kind of saw some of that in this person also.
Yeah. And he was such a
Dang.
gifted person. He was an athlete. He was a super popular guy growing up in school and somebody that I actually looked up to a lot. Even if he was younger than me, I just really appreciated how he was such a gifted person. He was likable by everybody. And here's somebody that had his life completely destroyed by heroin, by meth, by certain things that were pulling him in, cocaine, got involved in the dealing and that kind of thing. And next thing you know,
Wow.
he's sober, but he's not operating out of any program. He's still dealing drugs. He's still like in an ongoing battle in his mind. And when I found out that he had died and he'd taken his own life, there was actually a couple days before that where I could hear someone contemplating committing suicide in my mind. And it was a
No
very
kidding.
weird experience because, not even kidding you, so strange.
I believe it.
And
Listen, we've talked
I
about
had
some
to,
other weird things on the show. Some things cannot be explained. And what is that? Is it religion? Is it magic? Is it just science we don't understand? Is it all of those things at once? So, hey, if
yeah,
you say it happened, I
it
believe
was
you.
freaky. Well, it was freaky because a couple days later I found out he died. And that he had committed suicide. And
Wow.
so here I have somebody contemplating suicide in my head, not even me, right? I had my own experiences too, but I was like, something's wrong. Like someone's in big trouble. And I reached out to a friend of mine because I thought it might have been him, but it wasn't.
So you had that
Um,
instinctual sense, almost like a premonitory sense, enough that it actually motivated you to connect with somebody else that, I mean, who knows, right?
yeah,
Like you can talk about like either
yeah.
God or the universe or whomever, these patterns of maybe there is a reason for this or that or, whatever. Like, who knows? It's fascinating to think about. So this person
It was
died
really sad.
then. And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I found that out, it was weird. Like I just was like, well, why couldn't I stop it? Why couldn't I stop it myself? And I had this care for other people when I didn't care about myself at all.
Mm,
And that was a very interesting time period for me because what ends up happening during this time is why did it happen? You have like this survivor's guilt, like, oh, that
yeah.
could have been me, but why wasn't it? Um, and you know, like I felt like why if I had like this premonition, why couldn't I be of service to somebody that was in need? And there was like a reunion, like a friends reunion that took place a couple weeks later, and this was it was a very like important like get together because it's my friend. He's coming in from Africa, right? South Africa. He's based out there
Wow.
with the Marines, and he was coming home. And all of like my old drinking buddies and stuff were gonna be there, and I was really looking forward to this event. And my wife was gonna come, and um, we were on our way there, and um, I got like this weird disturbance, and it was this reminder of my friend, right? And we get to the event, and it's at a bar, and I've made a gentleman's agreement with myself, with my wife, with different people. Like I'm only gonna have, uh, two drinks, right? If I'm gonna drink, I can control it. I'll
Sure.
just stick
I'm
with
going to,
two.
right. I'll set a limit. And then, this person I've told someone. So now I have
Yeah.
external accountability. What could go wrong?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting experience. I end up going to this bar, and I'm just like, I reached this point of kind of like I was just bewildered by addiction, I think, at this point, because I just was
Hmm.
like, I couldn't even, I was so trapped in my own head that when somebody showed up that reminded me of this person that committed suicide, because he was his best friend. His name's Travis. The person that died is Jake. And when he showed up, it was the first time I had heard from him since Jake had committed suicide. And he pulled me aside and told me the story about how he found him. You know, he had came up and so he actually found him.
Trauma for him.
So
for Travis, that, I mean, wow.
Yeah, that completely changed, like, it changed the dynamic for the rest of the night. I couldn't even handle myself. I just was like a complete wreck. And, you know, at this point, I ended up breaking my agreement. So I ended up having 3 instead of 2. And so this agreement, I didn't just make with myself and with somebody else. I actually made it with God. I said, I will only have 2. And because I had a loose relationship with a higher power or God consciousness,
right? Like,
or whatever you want to call
it. Whoever that is, sure, it's going to be 2, fine. I promise. Right? Like, yeah.
Yep.
You know, thanks for the not death. And I'm going to keep it to 2.
Yeah, thanks for the not death. Exactly. And then when I had 3, I had this depression that just came in so strongly. I almost derailed my marriage because I was just like so stuck in my head. I remember that night going home. Nobody knows what I'm going through with all this stuff except for one person. That was the person I talked to, Travis. And yeah, on my way home, I'm like, you know, being toxic with my wife, and I'm 3 drinks in, and you know, the next day I decided I'm going to get sober, but I was completely like, my mind was just gone. I had so much depression. It was unbearable for me. And I feel like in a way, it's because I opened myself up to that. Right. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's so interesting because I feel like it's very common to have this conversation with people, and, you know, their rock bottom is often accompanied by this sliver of hope. And, you know, there a lot of times there are reasons for using or drinking or, you know, whatever is the despair. And it's curious because it's almost like the opposite here, where you were just absolutely in the deepest depths possible. And it's like, you were just like, I'm out, I'm done. This is awful. It's poison and I'm just done. Right. That's really interesting.
I didn't want to be done. I didn't want to be done, though. I did not want to be done. I wanted to, I couldn't accept the fact that I couldn't drink. And so for like the next 6 months, I'm depressed. I'm reluctant to be sober. I'm, you know, a dry drunk pretty much. You know, my brain is trying to like restructure itself. No treatment, nothing like that. I didn't even know that treatment was a possibility. I actually thought it was just for people that went to Pastures Malibu somewhere and like Hollywood.
You just think it's a check-in 30 days plus resort, and not that there's all of these outpatient programs. Like you can even go through detox at home. You know, you just have like check-ins, medications, stuff like that. People don't know this. They have no idea that there's so much more outpatient stuff out there.
I had no idea. I would have been so much better off, because the way that I approached everything was what I had learned. It's like, okay, you don't need medication. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't need help. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You just need to do this yourself. You can do this. Everybody else has done it in your family. Why can't you? And for me, it was really hard because I just ignored any of the possibility of there being outside help other than AA. And that was good for me. I eventually got sober and stuck, like sober-minded anyway. I stuck with the
Yes.
program, and I
Yep.
finally, I just stuck and stayed, and I finally started to see, myself get free from some things. But man, what an experience. Um,
Seriously.
Also, what
And
helps,
so,
did you have intervention ever? Like people that intervened on your behalf, like, hey, uh, you've really been going downhill. Like you should probably consider this or anything like that.
actually, that's a lie. I did. I was very good at hiding how bad it was with during my alcohol, because I have like two eras, and they were all within the last couple of years. The one was the alcohol era from like 2020 plus, and I was very good at hiding that and just being like the fun drunk, or it's not a big deal. And I was also so grief struck that I a couple of friends kind of had to give up on me for a while, understandably. We've kind of repaired those relationships, blah, blah, blah. Enough about that. And then the second era was my really bad kratom era. And Chris was the one
Mm,
who actually was like, with addiction help. Chris is our founder and he's my boss. And I had
yeah,
been working already with addiction help for a year, I think at least a year at this point. Um, yeah, a year and a half. And he called my ass out. He was like, listen, and he didn't know what it was actually. He didn't suspect anything necessarily, because again, I was really good at hiding it. Well, I mean, I was somewhat good at it, but I was starting to not make my
yeah,
deadlines, and I was starting to, like he could tell I'm always up weird hours and sleeping weird hours, kind of, like I'll go through phases where I'm doing the night
yeah,
owl thing, or I like to get up early and whatever, but it was like really
yeah,
erratic, and he just knew something was up, and that's what he said. He's like, I don't know what's going on with you, but something is up. And it was that sort of moment of like, I want to be in trouble. I talked to
yeah.
Ashley, my very first episode, and she talked about, when she got arrested for, oh, sorry, Ashley, what was it? She got arrested for something, but it was related to, the substance abuse. And there was just this kind of moment of like, I'm busted, and you feel terrible about it, but you're also relieved that somebody is like you messed up. And I
Yeah,
can see that you have messed up, and it's like the game is over. It has caught me,
yeah,
you know, relief.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can relate to that because I had people on the way that were like, "Dylan, I really think you should stop drinking." And even when I'm having, two, I'm operating because I'm not all in. Too, that's the thing is like I would operate more normal, actually being
Mm.
all committed. So here I am between one thing and another. I need to be just sober enough, and I can't get too out of control. It was actually more dangerous for me to be in that place mentally
To try to
than it was
temper
to
it.
be
That's
all
really
in.
interesting. So I also have ADHD, and I mean, I know there's a ton of research already about that as a co-occurring issue, and like I guess it's 50% of us also qualify for a substance use disorder. I mean, and that's based on self-reporting, so who knows
Yeah,
how much it actually is. And the way different chemicals
fifty
affect our
percent.
frontal lobe, blah blah blah, 50%. Yeah. But somebody else
Wow.
that I know who I'm not going to give any identifiers, to keep them also anonymous, but someone else I know has ADHD and has struggled with substance abuse, and very similarly, they can also not temper it. It's got to be all or nothing, and that
Yeah,
kind of thinking and that kind of just behavior in general is kind of a classic ADHD trait. We tend to be very intense. We can have really strong emotional reactions to things, and we can sometimes struggle
yeah,
with black or white thinking. But when applied, I guess, in a positive
yeah.
way, it's like I'm like that. I have to abstain. I recently, this is a very silly example, but I really love Publix, and I like their buy one, get one things. And 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
they had buy one, get one donuts. And I'm not a big donut person, but let
Ooh,
me tell you, these were so good. and I just couldn't control
Yeah.
myself. That doesn't normally happen to me with food or other, consumables. But like after that, I said, I'm not buying these again. I cannot buy these again because I'll do the same thing,
Yeah.
and like, while that's a very
Yep.
kind of ha example, I think it's important for anybody to recognize those
It's a good
signs of
example.
like, oh yeah, no, this is not something I can temper. It's all or nothing. So we're going with
Yep.
nothing because I can't just subsist on donuts.
Yep.
It's not good for me.
Yep. Yeah. One, and that's the whole idea. One is too many, and a thousand is never enough. That's even with addiction. That type of thinking is, like when it comes to use, substance use. It's like it's addictive. It's an addictive frame of mind, and and you were
Yes.
talking about ADHD though, like that hyperactivity where it's like it's almost like a mental obsession of whatever it
Yes.
is. So it could be donuts, like I can see myself doing the same thing, to be honest, and I have done that, by the way.
Well,
I've
and
had
it's also kind of
you get
interesting,
one
and
or
I'm thinking about it now. Another classic hallmark of ADHD is like hyperfixations, and I've it was only recently diagnosed in the last couple of years, and so many things are making sense about me in my past. Like, wow, that's why I go through these phases of these obsessions. Like, that's what that is. They're hyperfixations. And I wonder, and I don't actually
yeah,
know the answer to this. So if any doctors are watching this, tell me. But
yeah,
like, does a substance become a hyperfixation, and subsequently can sobriety become a hyperfixation and kind of help power you through those tougher earlier days, because you're like, no, hell yeah, I'm doing this. I'm set on this new lifestyle, and then it becomes a habit, becomes a pattern, becomes a lifestyle kind of thing. I don't
right,
know.
right.
It's interesting.
I would think so. I would think so. As a no vice lay person, uh, just based on my experience, I mean, and you're bringing up a very valid point. I mean, does it become a hyperfixation, and is that an issue? I think it's an obsession of the mind. That's a classic trait of addiction and alcoholism, is that obsession, that mental obsession.
Right.
But if you have a co-occurring disorder, too, maybe that just makes it that much worse.
Right.
Like,
Because I've
if
heard
you
it
think about it,
described, this person that I'm thinking of, they took disulfiram, which is like antabuse. It will make them really sick if they were to drink. And they said, the thing that helped them specifically in the early days of their sobriety was, that voice, that obsessive voice that they almost felt like a slave to, of like having to drink. Or it's almost like, well, I don't want to,
yeah,
but like, oh, there's the obsession. It silenced that part. And because of
right,
having that medication, it's like, well, I have to tell that voice, like, F off. I can't, because if I do drink, I'm just going to barf a lot and have a really bad time. So, you know, that I never thought of it in those
right,
terms before. That's very interesting.
yeah, yeah. This is it's important to even start coming up with the merging of the mental health idea, because I think, well, SUD, right, substance use disorder, it's a
Yep.
mental problem, right? And so,
Hmm.
in combination with other problems like OCD, ADHD, sorry, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, that can really cause or complicate the issue that much more, right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
without going too far into the weeds, because I can also talk about brain stuff all day long. They're doing a lot of research right now about the overlap between ADHD. I'm going to say it wrong. Borderline personality disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and PTSD, because the Venn diagram has so much overlap between a lot of these things. And
yeah,
among all of those things, substance abuse and substance use disorder is sort of this also aside, but relates to all of them. So I'm very interested, really, to see kind of what we learn about the brain and how we classify these brain disorders and brain functioning issues in the next 10 plus years, because they're already looking at like, it almost seems like ADHD is like autism light. There's so much overlap. So what do we really
Yeah.
know about the brain and why it's doing these things, and why substance use is so appealing to people with like weird brains, basically. And I say that
Right.
respectfully as someone
Yeah.
who has a weird brain.
Yeah. Same here. Same here, in agreement. Right. I think one thing too, though, it's also interesting when you think about the spiritual component, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, alcoholism and addiction was a spiritual malady, right? And that's another thing too, that it separates me from my higher power, or that connection with uh, like a benevolent or a spiritual being, right? Or like
Yeah.
a higher power, God
Yeah.
consciousness. It would always numb that ability. Um, and I think one thing that I know for sure is like it's a thorn in people's flesh, that people that deal with like addiction and that kind of thing. I honestly think that it's just a way to detract them from that relationship, the very thing that can keep them alive. It's like, to feel spiritually dead. I don't know if you know what that feels like, but
Sure do.
it's basically like, yeah. So you understand like uh, that feeling of disturbance. It's like a high. It's like you're on high alert, right? It's like you know, uh, almost like fear-driven, mind-controlling type of
it's
experience,
it's a very
right?
physically heavy feeling, and it's very hard to describe until
Mm-hmm.
you're sort of
Yeah,
looking back on it and saying like, wow, it's a very just empty, I don't know. It's gross.
yeah,
It's bad.
yeah,
I get it. I get it. It's
yeah.
kind of hard to describe.
And it does affect you physically. It's like what's the, like, if I was gonna say like the 12-step version, I would say, they would consider it like an allergy, right? But like from a standpoint of the spiritual malady part, if this thing's going to separate me from God in any way, and it's pulling me away from that, then that's the ultimate. Like, I don't know if you believe in good versus evil, evil versus good, that kind of thing. I think that ultimately the evil forces that are against us are that much more, I guess, put us in a place of vulnerability, that much more for attack. And
Mm-hmm.
if like you've dealt with like generational problems of addiction and that kind of thing, it's only enhancing the the problem that you were designed to break. It's like giving a foothold for or a stronghold for like evil forces to come against you. For me, it's like good versus evil would be like, okay, on one hand I have God, and the other hand I have the devil, and like
Right.
the devil's trying to pull me down. And that's where all
Right.
those problems came into play. Was it the addiction that was the root of, or culprit of all of that? I think so. Um,
Right.
but
I
it's a
tend to,
complex
yeah,
issue, though.
I am a similar thinker, and I guess I don't know, my ideas keep evolving, I guess, as I age. So who knows what it'll be 10 years from now. But very similarly, I think very strongly we attract what we put out, and we get what we're seeking. And some people call it like high
Yeah,
vibrational and low vibrational. You can call it good
yeah,
and evil in this context, and also sort of things that are
right,
malevolent and malicious versus benevolent. And you know
right,
really that kind of more pure state that we are striving to be in as human beings, it kind of separates us from that, from authenticity, from our true selves, from
yeah,
love, however you want to
yeah,
quantify that. Some people believe like God is
huh,
love, some people believe that
right,
that that
Yeah.
life force that's kind of in everything, it kind of dampens that. Some people even believe, like when you get like super weird and kooky
Yeah.
with it, which is what I'm into, even can like dampen your
Fedora.
natural, psychic abilities, spiritual gifts, your ability to,
Oh yeah.
read
Yeah.
people, or,
Absolutely.
like have
Yep.
those really profound experiences with others. I mean, it's all it's doing is like, we think it's a social lubricant. You think maybe I can dance better, but listen, Tina, you cannot dance better. And, you're missing out on all these other
Yeah.
deep connections, right? Like, and I'm not
Right.
trying to listen. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, Jessica says that, we can't go out and drink and whatever. If you don't got a problem, you're fine. It's fine. I'm not judging you. It's not a big deal. But for those of us who, maybe need
Right.
to ask some
Yeah.
serious questions about what we're doing and how it's affecting us, for some of us, it's a dampener. It's not
Yeah.
good for us,
Right. Yeah.
Well,
And that's for the people, the normals, people
right,
that can pick it up, put it down, not, slam it and,
right.
end up having all these other problems.
And I'm even one of
So,
those weirdies, I've talked to a friend of mine kind of recently about this, where, I'm still like very leery about it, because I remember what it was like falling into that trap of like, just have a drink about it, So I'm very cautious that if I'm with some friends and, oh my gosh, this looks delicious, I kind of want one, but do I want one because it tastes good for that experience, or did I have a bad day and I'm trying to justify it? So, I'm still like very careful about
yeah.
that. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Well, this has been really fun. And I just looked at our little timer thing. I mean, we could go on and on because, I feel like we're friends now. You come on the podcast, the benefit, or, maybe it's
Yeah.
not a benefit. Who knows? Maybe it's a bad thing, but now we're friends. So
No,
we
this is
could talk
great. I love
forever and
it.
ever. But we can't.
Yeah.
Kyle would hate that. Sorry, Kyle. Kyle's our video editor. I've never met him and I love him. Like, thanks for editing this, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
But before we wrap it up, yeah, shout out Kyle. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to say or that you want to touch on?
No, I think, I think the one thing I would say is that if you deal with the issue of using, you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there that are succeeding in sobriety, and to seek out the resources that you've been given. There's so many out there right now that I wish if I would have just tapped into a fraction of anything, even in conjunction with the program that got me sober, which was 12 steps, I would be doing, I think I would have done much better early on. As my brain's starting to develop, like a sober state of mind, and my brain is kind of restructuring and stuff, and not feel like, I felt like I was so alone when it came to certain things. You don't have to deal with depression alone. You don't have to deal with, the byproducts of getting sober and away from the drugs or alcohol. Seek out the resources because they're there.
Right.
If I would have known about them, I would have had a much easier time with early sobriety, and it would have enhanced my chances of success that much more, I think.
So what would you
But
recommend? Like,
that's what
I mean,
I'm
that
saying.
sounds great, but like, so would you just Google like how to get help? What would you, if you could like go back in time and be like, here, young Dylan, like click on this, do this, write to
Yeah.
this person, like what specific actions would you have younger you take in a parallel universe?
I think that the people that had intervened with me, like had intervention, I think those people would have been great resources to leverage because they were the ones that really recognized this guy as a problem. And I feel like they were
So talk to the
also
people that
my
called your
greatest
ass out.
asset. Yep. And because they were so busy trying to convince me I had a problem that they weren't able to get to that place where they were able to give me suggestions. I was still bucking the idea. I didn't want it like that. I was reluctant to get sober until I became empowered to get sober. You don't have to come to near suicide attempts to get sober. You don't have to, go through the, the severe of circumstances when you have support. And so, because I felt like I was so alone, I was also eternally unique. Like nobody deals with these problems.
We
So
all
many
think
people
we're the
dealt with
most
the same
special,
problems.
most alone. Yes,
Yeah.
we
So
really
I would
do,
just
you
say
know?
that, just know you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. I feel
excellent.
that
Thank
way.
you. Something about, social media, etc. sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I'm old. I really like a lot of social media. You have to tailor your experience. There's a lot of good you can do with it. But I get it. It can make us feel really isolated and alone, and like everyone secretly hates us and everyone's ready to judge us. And for those of us with weird brains and
Yeah.
ADHD, like your brain is lying
Yeah.
to you. It's like, we like you.
Yeah.
I'm your friend. Right now I'm telling you, I am your friend. Whoever is listening, I am friends with you. So
Yeah.
you already have one
Same
friend.
here.
You're not alone. Done. Dylan's
Mhm.
your friend too. Look at us. We're both your friend. I'm sure Kyle is your friend too. Kyle's everyone's friend for editing these videos. So shout out Kyle. So it's 3 friends you already have. So you're not alone. You're not.
Yeah.
Reach out. Send me an email.
That's right.
I really absolutely do mean that. If anybody's listening to this or watching this and you're like, I don't know what to do, I'm having a bad day, look at this cool rock I found. All of those things are great things that I would love to have in an email. I'm not even kidding. I love weird stuff. So we're friends. Like, anyway.
Absolutely.
So I'm supposed to say like and subscribe, or are the kids even doing that these days? I don't know. But if you do like this video, hit the like button so that I know you liked it. If you hated it, that's fine. Hate it. Tell me about all of the things you hated about it. If you hate me, come and hate watch this every time I release them. Appease the algorithm gods. And that's it. Lights of Recovery.